Okay, welcome back to another author interview at Crystal Lake. And today our guest is Luciano Marano. I hope I pronounced that right. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk about my book and horror. Horror is my favorite genre. It's my favorite subject, and I'm psyched to be here. I appreciate the invitation. My name is Luciano. Yeah, I'm a journalist, a photographer, and most germane to this discussion, I'm an author of fiction, primarily horror and dark fantasy. I've written a couple of novellas, lots of short stories, and my new book is Humbug, out from Crystal Lake on December 2nd. That's what we're here to talk about, I guess, and holiday horror in general, why it pairs so well together, and some good old-fashioned ghost stories.
Yes, and indeed, we are here to talk about Humbug today. So give everybody a quick overview of what your book's about.
Yeah, so Humbug is a modern retelling of what I consider to be the most famous ghost story ever, right? It's a Christmas Carol reimagined, set in modern Seattle. The Scrooge character is this very cynical, burnt out, over the hill homicide detective who's on the trail of a serial killer known only as Humbug, who every year on Christmas murders one entire family. And the investigation has been going for several years. They've made no progress, and the brass is sort of threatening his removal, maybe forcing him into retirement. His brilliant young partner has died, and things are looking pretty bleak when, on Christmas Eve, much as in the original story, he receives a visit from the ghost of his dead partner, Marley, and she tells him that you'll be visited by three spirits who are going to help you, solve the case, fix your life, and become a better person. The ghosts are the grotesque, monstrous spirits of three infamous unidentified serial killers, so the Cleveland Torso murderer, Zodiac, and Jack the Ripper. And so I think you only think you know what happens, at least I hope so. I was trying to make the story relevant again, scary again, at least a little, I hope. And it's been one of my favorite stories my whole life, so it was a real thrill to put my own spin on Dickens' classic.
Okay, yeah. So other than the obvious Dickens novel, so what were your other inspirations for writing the book?
Um, the idea first happened while my wife and I were watching the Muppet Christmas Carol. We watch that like every year, and that was the year that I had revisited the original book for the first time in a long time. And so she had not read it, and she says to me during the movie, like, "Was this ever supposed to be scary? Because it seems like there are some moments that like they're trying to be spooky, but was it scary?" And I had to think about that. I said, "Yeah, I think there were certainly moments in the original that were supposed to be pretty horrific." And then we began to chat about what it would take to make something so well known and so universal seem dangerous again. And so my initial inspiration was actually kind of lifted from Tim Burton's remake of Sleepy Hollow, and I became really fascinated with the idea of how he turned Ichabod Crane into a police inspector or constable, I think they called it. So that really intrigued me because both my wife and I, we don't have a lot of similar pop culture interests, but we both like true crime and like documentaries about serial killers and police procedurals and forensic investigations. So it was a pretty easy idea then to pair those two ideas. Then I was left to decide what to do with the ghosts, and that took a little bit more research and sort of back and forth.
Okay, you mentioned three of my favorite things in that explanation: the Muppet Christmas Carol, Sleepy Hollow, and true crime.
Oh, did we just become best friends?
And also, I agree that the original Christmas Carol probably was supposed to be scary in somewhat because there is a Victorian tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas, which
Mm-hmm.
is what Dickens was kind of tapping into when he wrote that story. So,
Absolutely. And not just in his own work, he was a publisher of lots of like very popular magazines and periodicals at the time. The winter issue, which inevitably is the Christmas issue, was always full of ghost stories that either he wrote or he solicited from his friends and other writers. And yeah, that's a tradition going back, a long, long time. So the idea of Christmas horror or holiday horror being something kind of new or scandalous, I think, is kind of silly. We've been telling these stories in the dark, cold months of the year for a really long time.
definitely. So, what's the main character like in the book, and what's his emotional journey?
Yeah, we meet. Well, his name is Stuart Caine, Detective Stuart Caine. His nickname is Scrooge. This has been bestowed on him first by some of his meaner colleagues and then later by the press at large. taking advantage of the fact that he was on this. He's a grumpy old man, and he's on this case that's sort of ruining Christmas every year. His partner was named Marley, and then she died, and so it was sort of a dig by the tabloid media to call him Scrooge. He hates it, by the way, but I wanted to set the story in a world that was more recognizable for everybody. So the idea that a universe in which A Christmas Carol does not exist seemed too far-fetched to me. Yeah, ghostly visitations, trips to the past, I can accept all of that, but a world where nobody had heard about A Christmas Carol I thought was too far. We meet him at a very depressed place. You know, he's estranged from his daughter, he's divorced, he has a drinking problem. I really leaned into all of those hard-boiled noir tropes of the haggard investigator to sort of ground the situation in some grittiness, some reality before we move on to, yeah, the fantastical appearances of ghosts. So he's a jaded guy. He's seen a lot of horrible things. He's done things that he regrets. He's got a reputation as being kind of a rough cop and like an enforcer kind of cop. I guess I was thinking, especially in the States right now, what's a harder sell as a hero or as a sympathetic main character than an old white guy cop with a temper? Right? This is something that we used to sort of idolize in like the Dirty Harry years, and I love those movies, but they don't play super well in the world today. And so I wanted to say, is redemption possible even for somebody like that?
That's interesting to use that particular stereotype as the Scrooge character. Yeah, I
Mhm.
can see that definitely. So, of course, A Christmas Carol has had endless adaptations, including the Muppet Christmas Carol you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so, why did you want to tackle that particular book? And well, did you find it daunting?
Yeah, it's so it's towering, right? In English literature, A Christmas Carol is big. Again, I do think it's the most famous ghost story ever. Probably, maybe Sleepy Hollow comes a close second, the Washington Irving story. But yeah, you just there's nobody that stands with Dickens. It was daunting until I realized how many different versions there had been. And ironically, I think that made it kind of less daunting when I realized if this doesn't work out the way I want, then I'm just one more person sort of riffing on this very popular, again, towering work of like literature, and nobody will care and it will move on and whatever. My friends will think it's funny. As it started to come together better and better, I noticed more and more, both intentional and not, sort of plays on the original or ways in which I was twisting the original story. That that kind of universality is super unique, and I do think that was part of what attracted me to the project. This idea that I don't know anyone who hasn't heard of A Christmas Story, and there are references, there are things in that story that have become so a part of culture. They're such shorthand that God, it's almost like a universal experience. Like everyone who's ever, if you know what Christmas is, you know what A Christmas Carol is. And there aren't many stories we can say that about. So I thought I sort of risk nothing if it doesn't work out. And the universality might sort of help other people come to this, my version, in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, even the title of the book, Humbug. I mean, if
Right.
someone says humbug at Christmas, you know exactly what they mean.
Oh yeah, and like Scrooge, if you were to call somebody a
The
Scrooge, they know
Scrooge,
what that
yes.
is. Marley's chains, this idea that we forge chains in life through all the bad things that we do or the petty things that we do, and that will follow you into the afterlife. I think that's become a really well-known sort of symbol or an idea. Tiny Tim and the God Bless Us Everyone. Like there are just so many things that have seeped into culture way beyond English lit or even Christmas in general.
Mm.
I do you have any other favorites besides the Muppets? Because I watched a lot of adaptations in the preparation for the writing of this book.
Yeah, well, I like the Bill Murray Scrooged. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah, that's fun. And the classic, I think the one with Patrick Stewart, I've seen
Mhm.
that one.
Yeah,
That's a
he's
good. I mean,
half
there's
the
so
name
many
Shakespeare.
classic interpretations. I mean, it's hard to pick one of them because they kind of all blend together after a while.
Right, that's a good point because I had the same thought. I was like, wow, we keep telling ourselves this story, but we don't really change it that much. This is even a modern reinterpretation. Like there was one just a few years ago with Guy Pearce as Scrooge. It's much darker, it's much more serious and kind of horror-y, but it follows all the same beats and it's still a period piece. So I thought, well, isn't that interesting? That might be um, I guess I would say the common phrase is something like familiarity breeds contempt, and I don't know if that's totally true, but I do think familiarity breeds complacency or indifference. And you maybe think you understand this story better than you do because you've seen so many adaptations or because you know the sort of major beats. But the idea that this is a story people come to first through adaptations is also really interesting. Like you will know the story through Mickey or the Muppets or Bill Murray before you ever read the Dickens story. And that's true for most people. It's true for me. And
Mm.
that was another aspect of the story and its legacy that I found really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's even a Western interpretation of it. I watched it. It was a
Mhm.
some made-for-TV movie I watched years ago. I don't remember the title or who was in it. I just remember there was a Western interpretation of it.
That's
Like,
cool. I don't know about that one. That sounds awesome.
oh, it was a very blink and you'll miss it, I think, adaptation. But I mean, I do remember watching this Western TV movie that adapted A Christmas Carol in the Old West, which was very interesting.
That is cool. I saw one on the stage a few years ago here in Seattle. I forget the name of the show, but it's about an actor, this bitter old actor who has played Scrooge every year for like 50 years. And he's super sick of it and he hates Christmas and he's got all these problems in his life. And he gets visited by the ghosts of three different sort of like theater icons or theater archetypes. And that was another one I was thinking of as I wrote mine. I was, oh yeah, you really could set this in any sort of like subgenre, or you could alter the time and the place. It's just so sympathetic a story. Who doesn't love a redemption story?
Yeah. So, now your book takes an interesting twist with the ghosts
Mhm.
and using infamous serial killers. But I'm curious as to why you picked those particular three serial killers.
Right. So the ghosts I chose were the Cleveland Torso Killer, also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, Zodiac, and Jack the Ripper. And these three killers have sort of two things in common that decided for me that they were the right choice. The first is that they were all technically unidentified. And I think if you enjoy true crime, like I know you said you do, I just sick to death, and I'm really over the rock starification of serial killers. I don't find them to be sexy or compelling or cool. I find them to be interesting, but that's
Mm,
not the same thing.
yeah.
So I wanted to choose people who I would not be adding to a real person's like ego trip or legacy of cleverness, because there is a certain importance in the back and forth between Scrooge and the ghost. The ghosts have to be charismatic, they have to be interesting, they have to have cool things to say, or the plot doesn't move forward. And I wasn't going to attribute anything cool or charismatic to like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy. Like I think we've all heard enough about that. The other thing all three of them have in common is that they desperately wanted to be infamous. They reached out to the press and to law enforcement. They taunted people. They wrote letters. They sent packages. And then they died unidentified, which to me means that they sort of get what they want, but maybe not really, right? You're immortal, you're a legend, but nobody will ever really know who you are. And that made me think, but what a double-edged sword that must be. And it pleases me to think that they are, if there is an afterlife, that they are unhappy or unfulfilled because they didn't get to be the big bad guy that they so badly wanted to be. I think of like what's his name, BTK, Dennis Rader, I think it is.
Hmm.
He almost got away with it. He was on his way to being the next Zodiac, and then late in life, he had what essentially was like a crisis where he realized he was going to die anonymous, and so he returned to his crimes. He started reaching out to the police again. Technology had moved on in ways he didn't understand, and that's what got him caught. But I kind of feel like that's what he wanted. It was it was it was more distasteful to die an average person than it was to be loathed and hated by the world, but infamous. And so my killers that I chose, they did sort of quote unquote get away with it, but to what end? And that allowed me to make them look and act however I wanted.
Yeah, and I suppose one prerequisite would they have to be dead because they're
Yeah,
coming back as ghosts.
that's true. Yeah, you had to choose somebody who you were fairly certain was not around anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess theoretically it's maybe technically possible that Zodiac is still alive, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, probably because I mean, there's probably a good chance he died at some point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Do you think A Christmas Carol is a natural fit to be reimagined as a horror novel?
Yeah, definitely. Probably because, like I was saying, I kind of started out as one. It's always been kind of a horror story, and I cast a pretty broad net in terms of what I consider to be horror. So yeah, I think the original totally qualifies, and it wasn't difficult to just sort of lean into the more grotesque or dark, transgressive side of the story.
Mm. Okay, so what's your favorite scene in the book?
Oh, favorite scene. I guess I'm first and foremost I'm proud of the tone because I wanted to celebrate the holidays, but not in an overly sentimental or kind of like sweet way. So this is an affirmation of maybe the more I don't want to I keep saying universal. That's not fair. I shouldn't say that again. There is a secular side of the holiday that I think is important to everybody, no matter what sort of religion you adhere to or whether or not you care about the history of the holiday. It's a nice time towards the end of the year when things get dark and cold to maybe pause and look back on the year, what you've accomplished, what you've endured, what you've overcome, to celebrate people who matter in your life, to make plans for the next year. And that can be a nostalgic experience. It can be an anxious experience, and both of those mindsets, though, lend themselves well to a horror story. And I think, man, yeah, it's so tricky because I would never like swagger in here and say like, oh, I'm gonna fix Dickens. Dickens is a genius, and I'm just sort of hanging out here. But there were parts of the story that I thought could use a little cranking up or a little ratcheting up. The stakes needed to be reevaluated, and so as you're reading this, you may recognize certain beats from the original, but I don't think you want to place any bets on whether or not it ends as happily as you think it might. Right? The redemption of Scrooge is the point of the story, but does he survive that experience? Does he fix the other relationships in his life? Does he figure out who the killer is? Does he stop the killer? I think those are the things I wanted to leave sort of hanging, which make the story that much more, I hope, intense and engaging.
Yeah, and I could see having to update Dickens a little bit. I mean, writing styles have changed between
Yeah.
the centuries, so yeah.
Also, you want to talk about an unsympathetic main character? I think in this day and age, the miserly billionaire who
Yeah.
cares nothing for the poor. That's just a little too out of the headlines for me. It's much easier for me to make an abusive, horrible cop a hero than it is to make Elon Musk a hero.
Yeah, he's more the villain type these days than the than
Yeah,
the hero, yeah.
yeah. I hope he gets his redemption and he finds his ghosts.
Did you find anything challenging about writing the book? Did a scene or a character give you any trouble?
um, yeah, I guess I pride myself. I think I do very well with dialogue, and having been a newspaper reporter for a long time, I conducted a lot of interviews and I transcribed a lot of interviews. So I think that's something I do well, and editors and readers have all been very kind in singling that out about my work as something they really enjoy. Where I struggled, I think, was like the two-thirds part of the book is the problem for me with everything I ever write, where there's like a ton of momentum in the first half and I know how it ends, but there's this weird moment where you can't quite connect what you've got to where you want to go. And I have stalled out and floundered on so many projects at that exact point. And so I was worried that was going to happen here. And I really loved what I had so far. So I did struggle with that a bit, and it was extremely helpful to have the kind of armature or skeleton of the original story to sort of look to and say, what happens at this point in the story? What did Dickens have happen? And then how can I do that in a little different way, put my own sort of spin on it, or how would that situation apply to my character in his particular circumstances? So that moment, that was tough, but I am very happy with how it all came together. In the end, I had some very generous early readers who took a look at my first draft. They were very encouraging, very helpful, and that made all the difference.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers struggle with that middle section between the that you have to get to from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, I've heard it called the slog. I've
Yeah.
heard it called the hang. There's I once heard someone call it the last turn, and I think that's probably accurate too. There's just there's a moment where you have to fess up to the fact that not all of it is as good as it was in your head. Not yet, right? This is a
Mm.
first draft, or this is a rough draft. Get it down on paper, keep moving, finish it, and then we'll go back and we'll play with the details and we'll refine it later. At least that's
Yeah.
how I do it. If I lose my momentum, then it's much harder to get started again.
Yeah, it's just yeah, just get the words down on the paper. Don't matter if it's particularly good at that point. Just that's all fixed in editing.
Totally. You should see some of my first drafts. There are whole sections where it's just like parentheses, more story here, parentheses, and then like move on. And we're like, wow,
Yeah,
we'll fix it in post. Come
yeah,
back to
it's like
this.
yeah, the book I'm currently writing, big sections of it right now are just dialogue, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll come back and stick in the descriptions and the action and all that later. So
Totally. I think, well, do you find, I find in dialogue, especially, the flow is so key, right? Like I
mm.
read it out loud to myself, or maybe sometimes I'll have my wife read one part, almost like we're rehearsing a play. Like, do you read dialogue out loud as you go?
Not as I go. I do when I'm done, like when I'm in the last editing stage, and that's when
Hmm.
I fix anything that's clunky or it's like, yeah, that just doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your neighbors are happier with you because in the summertime, if my window's open, where I write sort of like looks out over some other people's like houses and property, and I'm sure they hear me here talking to myself all the time and just think like that guy's a lunatic.
Yeah.
That's we're worried about him.
I'm not sure if my neighbors are happy with me or not because I tend to curse at the manuscript when I get into
But, wow, there's a lot of fighting going on over there again. Somebody check on them.
it's like, yeah, I'm just going, yeah, I can. It's like I get stuck and I start cursing at things. It's like,
Yep.
okay, it helps the process, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes you gotta.
yeah. So, is there a facet? Well, you were talking about the middle, but is there a facet of writing fiction that's tricky for you in general besides the middle part?
I I guess I spend a lot of time. I'm not a super prolific writer, and so I think I spend a lot of time talking myself out of writing things. Where I'll have an idea, and then I'll search for things that are very similar to that, and be like, "Well, they did it better, so I don't have to," or this is too derivative. I'll just move on to some other thing. And when the idea for Humbug wouldn't leave me alone, that's kind of how I knew that this was worth exploring. And then as I started to work on it, I really liked it and I could sort of see where the story was going, which is a rare experience for me. I'm often as surprised as anybody else when I get to the end of what I'm working on, which is a nice experience when it works out, but it's super frustrating when you love your beginning and then have no idea what happens next and you stall and you think and you worry and then you start to doubt your own abilities. So I think this came together much easier than previous projects. I struggled with doing justice to the original because it is so beloved, while also giving people something that I hope they haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's always good when a book is easy, when the flow of it is easy, and
Yeah.
you like what you're doing. I was writing a book this month and I had to stop because it was just like, nope, nope, this needs more pondering.
Yep. Yeah, there's something to like the cooking process, right?
Mm,
Like
yeah,
sometimes writers are working whether they look like it or not. That's what I tell my editors all the time. I'm working. Can't you tell how hard I'm working? I'm thinking it over.
yeah. I mean, sometimes you do need that space just to think
Mhm.
about things and why things aren't working, as opposed to trying to struggle with it. So, what's your favorite aspect of being a writer?
Ooh. Uh, I don't know. I guess I never really, not to sound too woo woo or metaphysical about it, but I don't know that I ever considered it a choice to be a writer. I think people are drawn to disciplines that help them make sense of the world or feel accomplished or satisfied in some way. Like a lot of writers, I think I grew up maybe shyer than I let on, maybe more fearful than I let on, and I loved to read. And those experiences meant so much to me that I sought to recreate them. So I guess I don't know. I guess if I had to choose something most fulfilling about being a writer, well, I guess there's two. On the one hand, I do look at it as kind of a superpower, right? Like if you're bored or, stressed out, you get to sort of take a vacation from reality when you're, crafting your own worlds and characters in your head. And that's a wonderful experience. And when it's going well, when you actually sit down to write and it's going well, it really is like the best feeling in the world. Um, it must be, if God exists, that must be what they feel like. when things are coming together the way they hoped. On the other hand, I really enjoy the freedom that being a writer grants me to not judge my own thoughts too harshly. I think too many people walk around in the world ashamed or conflicted about what, or they're just sort of passing fancies or maybe intrusive thoughts. Who knows? When I'm at the grocery store and someone's annoying in front of me in line and I fantasize about doing terrible things to them, I don't think, oh, I'm a bad person. I think, well, I'm a really good horror writer, right? Like, what I might use this for later. I'm not going to hurt this person. I would never hurt this person. But in my story, this fate might befall somebody, and won't that be entertaining? So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
permission and freedom, and it's kind of a vacation from whatever actual life you're leading at the moment that you find boring or dissatisfying.
Yeah, it's like that meme, "Don't piss off the writer, they may kill you in their book," so
Oh, that's a joke among my wife and my friends that yeah, continually it's like, well, don't say that around Luciano, it'll wind up in a story, or someone will tell a story when we're hanging out, and everyone will sort of turn and be like, oh, that's going in one of his books.
So, have you branched out into other genres besides horror?
Yeah, I guess technically, I don't know. Again, I cast a pretty wide net. It's a big tent horror. I think I'm not a gatekeepery kind of nerd. I think there are many kinds of horror, many subgenres of horror, and most of what I write probably falls into that camp at some point. Dark fantasy, sort of transgressive crime, noir. Those are the things that I love to read the most, and so I think that's what shows up in my writing.
Mm.
If somebody were to say that they don't like horror, and I do hear that on occasion when people are discussing, like, oh, they introduce me in my work, and I'll meet someone who, they're like, well, I'm glad you're doing well, but that's not for me. I always think, I bet if I were to examine the things that you love, there is horror in those things. Like the thing, not to pontificate too badly, but I think about this a lot. What happened to horror is kind of what happened to like gospel and blues music, and it's that like everybody stole our chords, they stole our
Mm.
licks, right? So now horror will show up in places that you don't expect. It shows up in kids movies, it shows up in all of those like police procedurals, like Bones and Criminal Minds and CSI. Like they all really lean into the horrific aspects of the investigation, or the physical mutilation and forensic study. Those are shown in kind of horrific terms. And yeah, I guess if you think you don't like horror, I think you do. You just like it in a slightly different vein. So I would say most things I love and most things I make are horror, even if that connection is a bit more subtle or unexpected.
Yeah, I think people really don't understand what horror is either. I mean, when you say horror, most people, they're gonna think slasher movies or that
Yeah.
sort of thing, and that's what they don't like. But they'll read a ghost story, which is also
Mhm.
horror. So, yeah, they don't realize horror has very many subtle layers to it. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. If somebody were to say that they don't like slasher movies, I say, yeah, I get that. There's a bunch of them that I find derivative as well. Or if someone doesn't love, extreme violence, like the French extremity films, or the so-called like torture porn films, if that's not for you, yeah, I totally get that too. I find that to be quickly tiresome. So yeah, yeah, if those are your limited ideas of horror, I get why you think you don't like it. But there are so many aspects of even like capital L literature that are technically horror, that I think there's room here for everybody, and there is something for everybody. I mean, look at Dickens too. It doesn't get more respectable than Dickens, and he wrote a ton of ghost stories and horror stories, and there are elements in even his more
Yeah.
respected works that are totally horror.
Yeah. I mean, Dracula's horror. Frankenstein is horror. Though most
Totally.
people say it's sci-fi, it's actually horror and sci-fi both.
Hmm.
I mean, and like Sleepy Hollow, what we talked about earlier, that's a horror movie. I mean, it's a detective movie too, because he's technically investigating a crime, but it's also a horror movie. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things that people probably have watched or that they don't realize is actually horror.
Totally agree. One of my favorite examples of the last few years, I mean, maybe it's a little longer ago than that now, but that HBO limited series about Chernobyl. I'm watching that with my wife, and like this is like the most horrific thing I've seen in a long time. And it's a
Mm.
true story. It's a historical story. It's a science story. It's also a horror story. Like with very few tweaks, you could take what happened at Chernobyl and turn it into an outright fantastical or supernatural horror story, and really change almost nothing. That was some scary stuff.
Mm.
That's a kind of existential dread that would make Lovecraft like wet himself.
Yeah, yeah, sometimes real life is way more horrific than any fiction.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's totally true.
Okay, so who are some of your favorite authors, and is there anything special on your to-read list this year?
Oh man, I have so many favorite writers. I've worked in more than one bookstore, so the recommendation game is something that I do a ton. In terms of Humbug specifically, I think there are probably three. There were three writers who most influenced the tone and style of that book. My favorite writer of all time is Tom Piccirilli, who was a brilliant novelist, poet, short story writer. He died sadly kind of young. I think 2013 or 14 is when he passed. But he was blending genres in a way that is only now becoming really commonplace, especially like horror and crime or horror and mystery, things like that. So I love his work, and he was a big influence on this book. I also really love Brian Hodge. I think he's another one who really combines kind of like horror and crime in a really interesting way, very stylish, uncompromising, I think is the word I would use for his work. And I really love John Connolly, is an Irish writer of mysteries with a lot of like kind of bleed over into the supernatural. His Charlie Parker books are all brilliant. If you read some of my stuff and you like it at all, his is like top shelf version of that. Among more contemporary kind of writers working right now, I'm looking at my bookshelf here so I don't leave anybody out. I'm really fortunate to count among my friends a couple of really accomplished writers who I would say inspire me to work harder and to try better, like try harder. I think Keith Rawson is really good. His new book, Coffin Moon, is wonderful. Everything he's written is great. Believe the hype. He's brilliant. I think that Gordon B. White is another Seattle writer of weird, kind of dark, transgressive stuff, mostly short stories, a couple novellas. He's brilliant. I love Carson Winter. He has a very distinctive style. I would start with either The Psychographist or Soft Targets. Those are both books that I really admire. And let's see here, who else? I won't leave anybody out. Christy Noble is a writer who I really admire. I think her first novel, Beulah, is one of the great modern debut novels. Everybody should check that out. And Patrick Barb, who is just, I think, any second now is about to become a major figure in the genre. He's wonderful. His first collection, Pre-Approved for Haunting, is perfect. I don't think there's a dud story in the bunch. And Helicopter Parenting in the Age of Drone Warfare. It's a long title, short novella, long title. Some of the most disturbing ideas I've seen on paper in quite a while. He's brilliant.
Okay, so tell us about some of the other books you've written.
Yeah, so let's see here. I've written a bunch of short stories that can be found in many places. There's a bibliography page on my website with links to a lot of them that can be read or listened to online for free. And my debut collection will come out early next year. Gargoyle Safari is the title. That'll be out from Journal Stone, which I'm very excited about. And I've written a trilogy of werewolf novellas from Raventail Publishing. Yeah, the Ambush Moon Cycle. So those are three kind of short novels about a woman who's a werewolf and struggling with that condition. In my version of the story, the moon kind of has nothing to do with it. It's not a bite or an infection. She's born with this condition. It's genetic, and she's learning to sort of manage and control it with greater and lesser success. So yeah, I think mostly what I write tends to be, I would call it hard-boiled horror or supernatural noir. My characters are loners and losers and drunks and junkies and crooks and yeah, cons, desperate hopes. I like the grounding in reality that those sort of settings give a fantastical turn. And I like stories about competent adults with adult resources and adult problems. Not that I have a problem with a coming of age story specifically, but I think horror can become too safe if we too often lean on like the kids on bikes kind of trope. I think that's an overly romanticized version of a childhood that most people alive now didn't actually have. We're all thinking of like a 50s, early 60s kind of childhood. And I guess I like things a little darker.
Yeah, that's the best word, just a little darker.
Yeah.
So, what are you currently working on? What can readers expect from you in the future?
I think like a lot of writers, I've got a few stories at different like places of polish, a couple of short novellas that I'm working on. So there's a few plates spinning. As I said, my first collection comes out next year. Of course, Humbug's out on the 2nd, so that's taking up most of my attention at the moment, sort of promoting that and helping get that out in the world. And I have another novella set for publication later next year, but we're still signing the paperwork on that. So I'll be making more announcements about that as we go. In general, I'm sort of between larger projects at the moment, I guess, but that allows me to return to short fiction, which is my first love. So I hope to be in a lot of places next year. People will see at least 2 books from me. And man, yeah, just any interest, any attention. If anyone wants to spend some time on what I've made, I'd be flattered and grateful, and I hope you dig it.
Well, I definitely recommend readers go read short fiction of any kind,
Yeah.
because
I've
yeah,
I'm
I love it.
continually amazed. I don't know why it's not the like predominant form of fiction. At least in like America, everybody says they're so busy all the time, and they love serialized entertainment, right? Like we want episodes of things. Why short stories aren't the thing everybody's reading most of the time totally confuses me.
Yeah, it confuses me too. I love reading them and I love rating them. So I mean, I don't know why more
Yeah.
people don't, but yeah.
The only thing I can think is that from the people I've specifically talked to who don't like short stories, what they say is that they often feel unfinished, or that they invest all this like psychological energy and attention onto a character and a situation, and then it's over and they have to do it all over again. And so readers find that to be stressful. To which I say, I think maybe you're trying to read them in too rapid a succession, right? Like I usually read like a short story a day, or I have 2 or 3 different collections I'm cycling around through. So if you try to plow through a story collection as if it were a novel, I could see why that would be stressful. You should like slow down and pace yourself and approach it differently.
Yeah, well, some of the best writing I've ever read are short stories. I mean,
Hmm.
Ray Bradbury's stuff alone is brilliant. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah, he's a giant. I love his work. Yeah.
Okay, so I will think we'll wrap the episode up on that note. I'd like to thank you for being a guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, ditto. Thanks for the invitation. I really had a good time.
Okay, and that's it for this episode. And be sure to check out more videos on the House of Shadows and Ink. Bye for now, everybody.
Take care, guys. Thanks again.